In 1967, archaeologists uncovered a crime scene that shouldn't exist. When Pompeii was excavated, the world recoiled at the plaster casts of victims frozen in their final seconds of agony. But when the volcanic ash was cleared from the city of Akrotiri, they found a horror far more chilling. The city was empty. 4,000 years ago, this was the most advanced metropolis on Earth. It had 3-story skyscrapers, running water and priceless art. And yet, among the thousands of homes, there isn't a single skeleton. No bodies in the streets, no remains in the beds. Most historians call this a successful evacuation. They're wrong. You're about to see why the missing people of Akrotiri didn't escape to safety. They ran directly into a planetary-scale slaughterhouse that erased their very bones from the fossil record. Before the scream, there was the silence of wealth. Akrotiri was the crown jewel of the Minoan Empire, a Bronze Age superpower that controlled the Mediterranean. While the rest of the world was living in mud huts, the citizens of Akrotiri were walking on paved streets and wearing fine Egyptian linens. But this paradise was built on Thera Island that wasn't an island at all. It was the jagged rim of a massive, submerged caldera. For centuries, the city thrived on the fertile volcanic soil, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath their feet was a pressurized bomb waiting for a spark. The horror of Akrotiri isn't just how it ended, but the terrifying signals the people ignored. The wells began to smell of sulfur. The animals fled the hills. The gods were whispering, and the Minoans responded by building bigger temples. The end didn't come in an hour. It began with months of pre-shocks. Imagine living in a 3-story stone house and feeling the foundation beneath you turn into liquid. Archaeologists found evidence of massive earthquake damage that occurred weeks before the eruption. This is where the history horror begins. The citizens didn't just leave. They stayed to fight. They began a massive reconstruction project. We see walls that were braced with timber and cracks that were being patched with fresh mortar. Imagine the psychological state of a population trapped in a cycle of rebuilding, while the earth beneath them never stopped growling. They were trapped in a sunk cost fallacy, refusing to abandon their gold and their legacies until the very sky began to change color. This is the detail historians rarely discuss because it is deeply unsettling. Inside the ruins, archaeologists found piles of heavy household furniture, massive beds and chests, dragged into the middle of the narrow streets. If you were escaping a volcano, you wouldn't move your bed into the street. You would run. The most disturbing theory? The citizens weren't cleaning up. They were terrified of the vertical death. In a city of tall stone buildings, every tremor turned the streets into a canyon of falling masonry. They moved their furniture outside to create safe zones or makeshift shelters to huddle under, too scared to stay inside their homes, yet too attached to their property to flee the island. They were living in a labyrinth of their own possessions, waiting for a miracle that would never come. Eventually, the big one hit. The first phase of the eruption sent a pillar of ash 20 miles into the stratosphere. And this is when the evacuation finally happened. Thousands of people grabbed their most portable wealth, gold, jewelry, small looms, and rushed to the only exit, the harbor. This is why there are no bodies in the city. They were all at the water's edge. But here is the horror. The geography of Thera was a death trap. The harbor was a crescent-shaped bay surrounded by 1,000-foot cliffs. As thousands of people crowded onto the wooden docks, the volcano triggered a magma water explosion. The sea didn't stay calm. It retreated, sucking the water out of the bay and leaving the Minoan fleet grounded in the mud. Then came the roar, not from the horizon. While the people at the docks were struggling to push their ships into the retreating tide, a mega tsunami generated by the collapse of the island's center hit the coast. We aren't talking about a large wave. We are talking about a vertical wall of water, roughly 700 feet high. It hit the harbor with the force of 1,000 freight trains. The thousands of missing people weren't buried in ash. They were instantly pulverized against the very cliffs they were trying to escape. Their ships, their gold, and their bodies were dragged out into the depths of the Aegean Sea. This is why the city is empty. The evacuation was actually a mass gathering for a maritime execution. For anyone left on the outskirts, the secondary horror arrived shortly after. The pyroclastic surge, a cloud of gas and glass heated to 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit that raced across the water at 200 miles per hour. It didn't just kill, it incinerated. It turned human bone into ash in seconds. But there is a detail that remains scrubbed from the official reports. Deep-sea divers exploring the submerged perimeter of the caldera have recovered a series of perforated bronze discs, unlike anything used by sailors of that era. They aren't anchors or ornaments. When analyzed, their internal geometry perfectly matches the anatomical proportions of the human skull. Modern theorists suggest these weren't tools of the sea, but tools of the mind part of a lost medical guild that fled the island moments before the collapse. These physicians of the deep disappeared into the trade routes of the East, carrying scrolls of anatomy that wouldn't resurface for another 1,000 years. This wasn't just an evacuation of people. It was a desperate smuggling operation to save the blueprints of human life before the earth could reclaim them. Akrotiri remains frozen in time, a pristine monument to a vanished world. It sits as a reminder that the more advanced a civilization becomes, the more it has to lose. The silence of Akrotiri isn't the silence of a peaceful exit. It's the silence of a scream that was swallowed by the earth 3,600 years ago. If you want to keep digging into the darkest corners of our past, the parts the textbooks are too afraid to show you, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. We don't just tell history here, we exhume it. If this mystery of the missing dead haunted you, leave a comment below with your theory on where those thousands of souls ended up. Next time we move from the horrors of nature to the horrors of the blade. Centuries before modern medicine, one man was performing surgeries that shouldn't have been possible. We're going inside the operating theater of the father of surgery to witness ancient Indian surgery. How Sushruta performed operations 2,500 years ago. You'll see why the line between a miracle and a nightmare was thinner than a razor's edge. Thanks for watching. Sleep well, if the history lets you.